December 7th, 1941, a day that lives in infamy, or does it? But what if it never happened? What if the attack on Pearl Harbor never took place? Welcome back to TimeShift, the channel where we dive deep into history's most pivotal moments and ask the question, what if things had gone differently? Today we're tackling one of the most significant what-if scenarios in modern history. What if Pearl Harbor had never been bombed by Japan? How would America and the world be different today? First, let's rewind. On that fateful day, the Japanese military struck the U.S. Pacific Fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor, propelling the United States into World War II. The attack was swift, deadly, and changed the course of history forever. But let's imagine a world where this never happened. Picture this. December 7th, 1941, dawns in Hawaii, but instead of explosions and chaos, it's just another peaceful morning. The Japanese fleet, for reasons still debated to this day in conspiracy circles, never launched the attack. The U.S. remains neutral, observing the war from afar. What would happen next? Without the attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin D. Roosevelt faces a political dilemma. His hands are tied. Without the immediate and shocking catalyst of Pearl Harbor, the isolationist sentiment in America remains strong. Congress is divided. While war rages in Europe and Asia, the U.S. hesitates to get involved. So, what's the next move for America? Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Hitler's Germany is moving quickly. With the U.S. sitting on the sidelines, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, continue their conquest of Europe and the Pacific. With no U.S. intervention, the British forces face overwhelming odds. Perhaps even more significantly, the Soviet Union finds itself battling Nazi forces with little hope for Western aid. But here's where things get interesting. Some conspiracy theorists argue that Japan's decision to bomb Pearl Harbor wasn't just a military move. It was part of a larger, shadowy scheme involving unseen powers pulling the strings behind the scenes. Without the bombing, these hidden forces wouldn't have the leverage they needed to pull America into the conflict. So who stands to gain? Some believe that Pearl Harbor was the ultimate false flag operation, an attack allowed or even orchestrated by powerful elites looking to reshape the world order. Think about it. The U.S. economy had just started to recover from the Great Depression, and military spending was the key to continued growth. War was profitable. Pearl Harbor gave the U.S. government the perfect pretext to ramp up defense spending and turn America into the industrial and military superpower we know today. But if Pearl Harbor never happened, those same elites might have had to find another way to push America into the war, or perhaps to achieve the same goals without war. Some historians even speculate that without the unifying shock of Pearl Harbor, America might have splintered into internal conflicts, leading to a divided nation. What if the U.S. had remained an isolated, fragmented power, unable to influence world affairs as it does today? Now, let's talk about one of the most terrifying consequences of World War II: the atomic bomb. As we all know, the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, effectively ending the war in the Pacific. But what if the U.S. never entered the war in the first place? What if the Manhattan Project, the top-secret program that created the bomb, had never come to fruition? How would the world look today without the threat of nuclear weapons? Without the development and use of the atomic bomb, many experts believe the Cold War might have played out very differently, or perhaps not at all. Nuclear deterrence shaped global politics for decades, but in a world where no such weapon exists, the power dynamics would be entirely different. The US and Soviet Union might have engaged in more conventional warfare or, dare we say, actual diplomacy. Meanwhile, Japan continues its imperial conquest of the Pacific. But without provoking the US, they focus their efforts on consolidating their control over Asia. China, the Philippines, and other territories fall under Japanese influence, creating a new power bloc in the East. With the US remaining neutral, how long would it be before Japan faced no opposition? Could they have dominated the entire Pacific Rim, becoming the foremost global superpower? Yet not all is smooth sailing for Japan. Without the US stepping in, Internal struggles for power and resources might lead to conflicts within the empire itself. Some theorists suggest that without external enemies, Japan's own ambitions might have torn it apart from within. Now let's shift gears and talk about the economy. World War II pulled America out of the Great Depression, fueling an economic boom that lasted for decades. Factories churned out tanks, planes, and ships, while the military-industrial complex became a permanent fixture in the U.S. economy. But in a world where Pearl Harbor never happened and the U.S. never went to war, how would the American economy look today? Some argue that without the war, the U.S. might have remained economically stagnant, struggling to maintain its place on the global stage. Others believe that America's technological innovations, like radar, computers, and even the internet, might have been delayed or never invented at all. Imagine a world where the U.S. isn't a global tech giant, where Silicon Valley never rose to power, and where China or Japan led the world in technological advancement. In the end, the attack on Pearl Harbor set off a chain reaction that changed the course of world history. Without it, the United States might have remained on the sidelines, the Axis powers might have dominated the globe, and the world as we know it today would look unrecognizable. But could this alternate history have led to a more peaceful world, or would it have sparked even greater conflicts? In one possible future, with the U.S. staying neutral, the global order would have shifted. A longer, more drawn-out conflict in Europe might have resulted in a negotiated peace between the Allies and Axis powers. This could mean a divided Europe with Nazi Germany holding on to parts of the continent. The world might have entered an era of cold diplomacy, with the great powers constantly vying for influence without the U.S. playing the role of the global policeman. On the other hand, without American intervention, the war could have dragged on even longer. Germany's unchallenged expansion might have led to even greater atrocities in Europe. Japan, unchecked in the Pacific, could have consolidated its hold over much of Asia, creating an empire that spanned from Manchuria to the Philippines. And without the U.S. to tip the scales, global conflict might have lasted well into the 1950s, if not beyond. But what about the post-war world? In our timeline, the United States emerged from World War II as a superpower, leading the charge in rebuilding Europe with the Marshall Plan, founding the United Nations, and steering the global economy through institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. But if Pearl Harbor never happened and the U.S. had remained on the sidelines, who would have stepped into this role? Who would have taken charge of shaping the New World Order? In this alternate reality, the Soviet Union might have risen to become the dominant global power. Without U.S. intervention in Europe, Stalin's forces could have swept further westward, gaining influence over a greater portion of the continent. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Japan's dominance might have gone unchallenged for years, creating a bipolar world divided between Soviet and Japanese spheres of influence. But there's another layer to this story, one that goes beyond military strategies and political calculations. Some conspiracy theorists believe that Pearl Harbor was never just about a surprise attack. They argue that the events leading up to that fateful day were manipulated by powerful elites who saw war as an opportunity to reshape the global order and establish new systems of control. Was Pearl Harbor a necessary trigger to involve the U.S. in World War II, or were there hidden agendas at play? Some theories suggest that the attack was allowed to happen, or even orchestrated, to create the conditions for America's entry into the war. Without Pearl Harbor, these powerful figures might have sought other ways to push America into the global conflict, or in this alternate timeline, perhaps they failed, leaving America to watch from the sidelines as the world tore itself apart. In the end, the bombing of Pearl Harbor set into motion events that forever changed the world. It pulled America into World War II, leading to the eventual defeat of the Axis powers and the establishment of the U.S. as a global superpower. But without it, the world would look vastly different. A longer, more destructive war, a divided Europe under Nazi and Soviet rule, or perhaps a world where diplomacy, not destruction, shaped the future of humanity. Here at TimeShift, we explore how the smallest moments in history can have the biggest consequences. If Pearl Harbor had never happened, the world we live in today might be unrecognizable. No atomic bomb, no Cold War, no US hegemony. Instead, we might be living in a world dominated by other powers, with very different values and leaders. So what do you think? Could the world have been a better place if the US stayed out of the war? Or would it have been even worse? Thank you for joining us on this journey into an alternate history. If you found this video thought-provoking, make sure to check out our previous episodes, where we explore other pivotal moments that shaped the modern world. From the assassination of Abraham Lincoln to the fall of the Berlin Wall, we've got you covered. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know, what do you think the world would look like if Pearl Harbor never happened? Could America have remained a neutral power, or was war inevitable? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of TimeShift.